Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're making this pet sympathy card using some ink blending and some embossing. I'm going to start with some distress ink in antique linen, and I've already cut down some white cardstock with a stitched rectangle. It's a little bit smaller than A2 because I did want a little bit border around it when we put it on our finished card. I like to do the die cutting before I do my ink blending because especially with these stitched rectangles, when you die cut it first and then ink blend, you get some little darker areas where the ink builds up around all those little stitched parts along the edges, and I think that looks really neat. So just trying to go around all the edges here, get a nice smooth blend. I'm not too worried about the center of the card because we will be ink blending something over top of that here in a minute. Once we have that all ink blended and we're happy with that, I did spray a little bit of water on there, try to get some big water droplets to react with the distress ink. We'll let that sit for a few seconds. And then we'll take a paper towel and blot up that water to lift up some of that ink and give us some more texture on our background. The next thing we need to do is use some masking paper, and I have the Brutus Monroe masking paper, and these are cut down already to an A2 size. But since my card panel right here is smaller than an A2 size, I did take this and cut it down to be the same size as my card panel, which is 3 3/4 by 5 inches. The next thing I'm doing is taking an oval die and I'm lining it up as best I can in the center from side to side, but a little bit up as far as the center from the top and bottom goes, because I do want to put a sentiment down there at the bottom, so I wanted to leave a little bit of room to still make it all look centered. And I'll tape that down with some purple tape and put it through my die cut machine. So for this, we only really need the frame part of it, but I do save that oval part, and I just stick it in the little pocket that I have my oval dies in, and then I can use that on a project in the future. But for right now, we want to line this mask up with our card as straight as possible so we can have that oval there in the center. And I want to make sure to really press down those edges around the edge of the oval, because that's where we'll be doing our ink blending, and I don't want any to bleed below that. And I'm using the Faded Jeans Distress Oxide, and I wanted to use a Distress Oxide because that'll kind of sit up on top of the Distress ink, and I think it looks a little bit more opaque. I think it layers better than the regular Distress ink would for something like this. And I'm really focusing on blending around the edges of the oval and making that my darkest part, because as we get towards the center of the oval, I want that to be lighter, and that'll give us some dimension. Okay, so now we're finished there, and I'm cleaning my hands off before I take the mask off because I don't want any of my inky fingerprints to get onto the card. We'll slowly take the mask off. Trying not to rip it because I do want to reuse this mask. I made about 4 cards during this session, so I did reuse the mask a couple times. And you can see what a nice crisp edge we have around the perimeter of that oval, and we can see how it kind of gets lighter there in the middle. Now you could really do anything with this card from here, but for today I did want to emboss a paw print in the middle. So I'm taking my heat tool now just to make sure that ink is dry, because when we put our gold embossing powder on there, I don't want it to stick anywhere but where we want it to, which would be the stamp that we're using. So I'm going to use my Brutus Monroe Magic powder bag to make sure we don't have any static here, make sure everything's dry so our embossing powder only sticks where we want it to. And here I'm just testing it, so if you just push some embossing powder on your project and see, it didn't stick anywhere on there, so we should be good. So I'm going to put the powder on there again because I may have touched it somewhere and I don't want any oil from my fingers to get on the card and make the powder stick to that. So I'm just using an acrylic block here, and I'm using a paw print from the Simon Says Stamp Paw Prints on Our Heart stamp set and the Brutus Monroe embossing ink. And I'm just putting that right there in the center of that oval. And I'm putting some Lawn Fawn gold embossing powder on there. I just think that's a really nice little paw print, especially for Sympathy cards. So I did go ahead and emboss that. And now I'm going to emboss the sentiment, and I'm just putting a With Sympathy sentiment down here in the corner. And I'm using the Brutus Monroe Night Shift embossing powder in blue. I think that's a really nice navy, and I think it looks really good with this card. So just using the Nouveau Surface Sweep to kind of get off any extra powder or anything like that. And I did put it up on some foam tape, and that's our finished card. So thank you so much for joining me today. Please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you enjoyed. And we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.